In my copious notes, I've been advised I need to be careful what I say in introducing our next speaker, so it's just as well he doesn't need much introduction. George and I have come to a shared view of the Egyptian authorities. They blocked me from getting into Gaza. George was cheered into Gaza and deported by the Egyptian authorities. It gives me great pleasure to welcome George Galloway to speak.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The term persona non grata, which I wear as a badge of honour, as dispensed by the tin pot dictatorship in Egypt, means literally a person without status. But I know from the thousands, literally thousands, for all of my inboxes, collapsed under the weight, in the wake of the awarding of this medal by President Mubarak, that the person who is without status in Egypt is him and the rotten dictatorship that we have. There's no way around saying that. I have forsworn, by and large, to tell the truth about Egypt, preferring silence, diplomatic silence, because we needed to get our overland convoys through Egypt into Gaza. These convoys have now all been banned. I needed to be diplomatic about my relations with Egypt so that I could enter Egypt. I am not to be allowed to enter Egypt again, at least as long as this dictatorship is in power, which, pray God, will not be for very much longer. But there is now no reason for me to do other than place the responsibility that rightly belongs on the dictatorship in Egypt of the suffering of the people of Gaza. Because we can talk all night about the Israeli siege on Gaza, but there would be no siege on Gaza if the Arab country of Egypt would open the gate to the other Arab country of Palestine. And that's an inescapable, undeniable fact. And rather unfortunately, the Israeli ambassador to London, speaking on behalf of the Israeli government, as ambassadors do, on the Today programme, on Radio 4 of the BBC, at roughly 8:10, about 3 weeks ago, said, and I quote, "Egypt is entitled to allow anything it likes through the gate at Rafah. It can allow food, it can allow medicine, it can even allow belly dancers to cross the border at Rafah." Well, there's not much call for belly dancers in Gaza. But as we have the word of the Israeli ambassador for it, there is no escaping this demand that every hungry child in Gaza, every homeless family which has no roof, which has no windows, which is sleeping in the rubble or under the tents, every child that's short of medicine or medical attention could be relieved if the Egyptian dictatorship would open the gate at Rafah. So no meeting such as this can avoid raising that demand. Someone asked earlier if we should have sanctions against Egypt. I say no, because those sanctions would harm only the vast majority of poor Egyptians who live on the edge of the abyss. The regime feeds on the dripping roast of American largesse. Any sanctions would affect the man that drives the taxi or carries the bag, or the woman who cooks the food in the restaurants or guides the tourists around the historic places. I'm against any sanctions on the people of Egypt. But we need to hunt the dictatorship of Mubarak just like we hunt the war criminal Zippy Livni and Ehud Barak and the rest of them. Now, Dr. Daoud said that the war is not over. As I was leaving Parliament this evening to come here, Al Jazeera was reporting that the Israeli armed forces have moved in significant numbers to the border with Lebanon. So perhaps they're going to have another go. I was in Lebanon for a day or two last week, and of one thing I'm absolutely certain. If Israel invades Lebanon again, they will get exactly the same bloody nose from the Lebanese resistance as they got in 2006. When I was in Gaza 10 days ago or so now, it was reported in the Turkish media that Israel was planning to reoccupy Gaza. Well, let me advise them against it. Because if there's one thing even clearer than the miserable economic situation in Gaza, it's that the people of Gaza are unbroken, proud and defiant, and their resistance is strong. And if every single soldier that Israel possesses were to enter Gaza and attempt to occupy it, it would cost the lives of thousands of those soldiers, and they would not be able to occupy it for one day and one night, because the people would fight them from every house and every street and every alleyway. So I advise them, even more strongly than I advise them, against having another go with Hezbollah in Lebanon, not to dream of a reoccupation of Gaza. And when I was on my way back, I picked up Israeli newspapers to discover that the discussion about an attack against Iran on the grounds that Iran has no nuclear weapons but might be trying to get one, a country that has hundreds of nuclear weapons is planning also to bomb it. Well, if I can, I would even more strongly advise them against that. Any attack by Israel on Iran will be the biggest mistake in all history. Iran is not a broken-backed country weakened by 20 years of war and sanctions. Iran can defend itself, will defend itself against any Israeli attack, and I'll tell you something else. It will defend itself not just against Israel, but against the United States that would be required to sanction any such Israeli attack, and it will defend itself against any dictatorship in the Gulf that allows its air, its water, or its land in any way to be used to facilitate an attack on Iran. So we live in very dangerous times. And in those three stories, there is one common denominator: Israel. Why are we allowing this tiny settler state of 6 million people to so imperil the stability and the security of the world by planning and regularly exercising one act of aggression and destabilization after another? And here we come to some uncomfortable truths. I have really disagreed with Jeremy Corbyn in the 35 years I've been a comrade in arms of his. But I disagreed with one thing that he said tonight. He said that the Western countries, including our own, were walking on by whilst Israel was committing these crimes against the Palestinian people, against the Lebanese, and threatening to do so against the people of Iran. This is not true. Our country is not walking on by. It's not turning its face away. Our country is a co-conspirator and accomplice in all of these crimes. In all of these crimes.